Hello, welcome to yet another video on Power BI. In this video, we will discuss actions like cleaning the data, transforming the data, and loading the data into Power BI. Our friend Dbart is now asking a question. Hi Raja, I was told that Power Query is so powerful and can help you clean, transform, and shape the data from different sources. Can you show me simple examples to understand the power of Power Query? All right, we are going to do that. And prior to that, who should watch this video? If you have just started working with Power BI, this video will help you understand actions that you can do in Power Query. Or if you plan to appear for Microsoft certification exam on Power BI, this video covers the topics under module 2 of Prepare the Data. So, if you are clear about everything that will be discussed in this video and the previous video, that is part 5.1, you have easily covered 25% of your learning path. Okay. Have a look into this image and do let me know if you can identify the contents easily. Looks like we have a few numbers in different orientations, some date entries, some text entries, some blank values, some entries upside down. Oh my God. And they are not at all organized. All right. How about this one? Looks like they are now slightly organized, but still difficult to understand them easily. Okay. Any luck now? This is slightly better. Text entries are in a separate column. Date entries are in a separate column. Numbers are not mixed with the other type of entries. But wait, Raja, there are still blank values. And what about column headers? So the question is, if the data is dirty, is it possible for me to create reports out of that? Data can be dirty if it comes from a flat file such as a comma separated value file or text file or Excel files. Files from databases are often very organized and you need not have to worry much about such sources. Power Query has a great potential to clean, transform and shape your data. It can help you trim your data and make it process ready. Power Query has an incredible number of features that are dedicated to helping you clean and prepare your data for analysis. You will be able to resolve inconsistencies, unexpected or null values, and data quality issues. You will be able to apply user-friendly value replacements. You will be able to profile data so you can learn more about a specific column before using it. You will be able to evaluate and transform column data types. You will be able to apply data shape transformations to table structures. You will be able to combine queries. You will be able to apply user-friendly naming conventions to columns and queries. And finally, you will be able to edit M-code in the advanced editor. We are all familiar with the word called Power Query Editor. In fact, Power Query is a data transformation and a data preparation engine. The interface of Power Query engine is known as a Power Query Editor. The actions you perform in Power Query Editor will be recorded as steps in the applied steps. They are also converted into a script called M-code. In the Power Query Editor, you can clean, transform, and load data. It is also known as an ETL tool, rather a CTL tool also. The M code starts with a statement called let and then ends with a statement called in. If you're talking about the interface called Power Query Editor, we should be introduced with the tabs in the ribbon, the Home tab, Transform tab, and Add column tabs. When you closely monitor the Transform tab and Add column tab, you may be able to find icons that are similar in both the places. You may ask a question, Raja, why do I see the same icon in both the places? Because you may be performing an action, say for example, creating a column either by transforming an existing column so that the original column is thrown out, or you will be adding a new column from an existing column so that you retain both of them. So there is a major difference between the actions you perform in the transform tab and add column tab. Please make a note of that. The view tab is also important, and we have tools tab in which we will be able to check the diagnostics options about which we had a discussion in part 5.1 video, and we have the help tab too. If you want me to speak about the interface, there are 7 places I am interested. My queries pane in the left, the formula bar, the properties pane, the applied steps, preview information, column row information, and the column profiling information. We will talk about all these elements a little later. As of now, I want you to make a note of the view tab where you will be able to see the data preview section, which contains 3 important profiling tools called column quality, column distribution, and column profile. There is another section called the parameters, for which there is a checkbox called always allow, and you will be able to notice the advanced editor in the view tab. When you look at the query that is loaded into your Power Query editor, under every column header there is a green color line. The line below the column header should be a solid green line. If not, it highlights some flaw in the data in that particular column. Let me quickly introduce 6 different problems with the data and then give a demo on that. The first problem I'm talking about is called actual column headers start in the 3rd row in a particular file. We have a CSV file. As you can see it here, the column header for the table of data starts from row number 3. And when this data is acquired by Power Query editor, you can also see that the column header starts in the 3rd row. And unfortunately, the column headers in this case are notified as column 1, column 2, and so on. So how we are going to get rid of this problem? We are going to make use of tools like remove top rows and then promote first row as a header. The second information is about renaming a query. If the query's name is not user friendly, in the Power Query editor, in the queries pane to the left of your data, you can select the query that you want to rename, right click the query and use the option called rename, key in the name you want and then press enter. The third issue we are going to discuss is about spelling mistakes in item names. In this example, it could happen in any column. In the image, you will be able to see the word called fruits contains a spelling error in one of the bottom rows. The solution to get rid of this issue is to use an option called replace values. But Raja, wait, will it be easy to check for each row item like this? If that is your question, you will get your answers before the end of this video. The fourth problem is about replacing null values. Assume that occasionally you have null values in a numerical column, which should otherwise be a 0 value. If the value stays null, the averages will not calculate correctly. But again, Raja, will it be easy to check for each row item like this? If that is your question, you will have your answers before the end of this video. However, we are going to make use of an option called replace values to get rid of an issue like this. Similarly, the presence of duplicate entries could pose a problem, and you can use an option called remove duplicates that can do the job quite easily, but you need to be a little careful with this option called remove duplicates, which normally will keep the first occurrence of the duplicate records and remove the rest of them. It is a good idea to copy the query as a backup before you remove duplicates. The sixth item is removing the columns. One of the best ways to reduce the model size is to remove the columns that you want to require. You can achieve this in more than one way. You can choose required columns and then remove them, or choose 2 or 3 columns and then remove everything else. There is another option called choose columns that will be discussed a little later in this video. You may be asking, hey Raja, why don't you give us a quick demo on all these 6 points? Let us dive into action now. And prior to that, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. Thank you. Okay, let us have a quick demo now. A CSV file is kept open. As you can see, the column headers are starting from row number 3, and the item type column contains a name of items with spelling mistakes. We have a numerical column called unit sold, in which few cells are blank. I will now import this data from the CSV file. Click on transform data, and in my Power Query editor, I am able to see the column headers are marked as column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on. The first step I am going to do is to remove the top 2 rows here by choosing an option called remove rows and then remove top rows and providing the number of rows to be removed as 2 here. Click OK. The second step is to use an option called use first row as headers, and you will now be able to see that the text information in the first row will be moved up so that they will become the new column headers, and it has happened now. All these activities that I am performing in my Power Query editor are being recorded in the applied steps. So we have solved the first issue of identifying the column headers and making them available as a real column header. The second task is to rename a query. So when I look at the query's name here, it says 1 and then CTL, then hyphen and then 1, definitely not a user-friendly one. Similarly, when you look at here in the name tab of the properties pane, you can see it here also. You can either click here and make a change, or you can right click and then click on rename and then type whichever name you want. I'm just going to call it as sample. Hit enter. I have successfully renamed one of the queries. The third activity I'm interested in doing is to go to the item type column in which I have already identified an issue in terms of a spelling mistake. So I'm going to right click and then use an option called replace values and then provide the value to be found and then provide how it should be replaced with a new value, and then I click OK, and the task is now over. The fourth task is to get rid of null values in a numerical column because it will affect the averages that are being calculated in Power BI. To get an idea of this need, I'm just going to show you a simple example using an Excel sheet. You can see value A contains a numerical figure 5, value B is null or blank, and then value C is 5. I'm using a formula to get the average of these 3 values, and Excel returns 5 as the answer for that. However, if I'm going to replace this null or blank value with a real 0 value, assuming that 0 is the value for value B, then I can see the average value is changing. So this is the point you need to make a note. If there is a numerical column with a null value, you should learn to make use of an option to change it to a 0. So we are talking about the null values in the units sold column. I can right click, replace values. What need to be found is NULL or null, that should be replaced with a 0. Click OK, and we are now good to go. I am showing you the order ID column in which you can see first row and the second row talking about the same ID. So one of them is a duplicate entry. However, have a look into the unit sold values. The first one says 1593, the second one says 4611. Let us check what will happen if I am going to click on order ID column, right click, and then use an option called remove duplicates. You can see the first value is retained and the rest of the duplicate values will be moved out. The sixth step that I would like to speak about is called getting rid of unwanted columns. Say for example, if you have decided to use the total profit column in all your reports and you are not interested to use columns like revenue and total cost, you can select both of them by pressing the shift key in your keyboard, right click and then remove those columns. So this is a very quick demo on the first 6 points we have discussed. But there are many more actions that we need to discuss, maybe in the later part of this video or in a future video. Anyways, let us continue the journey of exploring Power Query's abilities. Let me now speak about an option called change type with local. You need to check your system to know how dates are formatted in your system. If your system is formatted for US region, the change type with local option may not be required for you, or you may have to perform it in a modified way. I'm going to show you an example in which we have a column called order date column. And in the Power Query editor, if that column is showing a calendar icon for you automatically, you may not need these steps. I'm talking about an option called change data type, wherein we are going to speak about an error occurring in the column type detection. Power Query editor automatically starts scanning the first 1000 rows, that is the default setting, and it tries to detect the type of data in the columns. Occasionally, it may identify a wrong data type for a column. In the image here, you can see the order date bears an ABC123 icon. That is, the date column has been erroneously identified as an alphanumeric column. You need to change the type of the data in this column to date. If you want to perform date-based calculations such as month over month, year over year, and other such functions. This problem that we are talking about is slightly peculiar. Some of the rows for the order date column are showing dates in the US format, like MDY. Some other rows are in the UK or Indian format, like DMY. And if you have a similar set of columns in your data, please note that the solution involved is called using local, which may be needed for you and a few similar users. Basically, date and time are numerical values in Excel as well as in Power BI. So they need to be handled with extra caution in Excel as well as in Power Query. We are going to see about change type with local in a few minutes. I would like to introduce about profiling data, which is about studying the various factors about the data. As informed in the previous section of the video, we have 3 profiling tools called column quality, column distribution, and column profile. And I prefer to call them as QDP so that I can remember them easily. Please make a note that column profiling is based on top 1000 rows by default. And whenever you want to do a profiling based on the entire data set, you need to switch to the option. Using column quality, you can identify if a column contains any erroneous entry or empty values. Column quality shows you the percentages of data that is valid, in error, and empty. In an ideal situation, you want 100% of the data to be valid. The actual number of valid, error, and empty entries can be viewed by hovering your cursor near the green line below the column header. You can note that there are 3 empty values in the units sold column, about which we spoke a few minutes earlier. So, it's going to be easy for you to identify whether there are any null values or blank values in a column. If you can start using column quality, if you feel that the data source may have such issues, you will not be required to perform this activity in every file, but whenever you suspect that there could be a null value in any of the numerical column, you preferably make use of the tool called column quality. When I speak about column distribution, I want to give a thumb rule. More unique rows, less compression. More distinct rows, more compression. But Raja, wait, what is this? And why should I know about this? Column distribution shows you the number of distinct and the number of unique entries in the selected column. Data compression is a reduction in the number of bits needed to represent data. Compressing data can save storage capacity, speed up file transfer, and decrease cost for storage hardware and network bandwidth. There is an engine called Vertipack engine in Power BI. that stores the data in individual columns and not as an entire table that you are loading. In fact, it stores a compressed copy of the database in memory. Compressed columns make your code and query run faster. They occupy less amount of space in the memory. So the more distinct rows, the more compression makes sense for me now. If you have a date and time column, it is always better to split them into individual columns. You can see in the image that if I have a column that is showing date as well as time, that particular column in this example is talking about 12 distinct and 12 unique entries, and the more unique, less compression. Had it been split into a date column and time column, then I can see the date column holds two distinct values, good for compression. The time column shows 6 distinct values, that is also good for compression. When you split the date and time column, here is the actual benefit. What you see after the split is just two columns, date column and time column with 12 rows each. It is actually stored as a simple table, as you can see in the images. So the first image says there is a date called 24th November 2021 that is occurring 6 times in the given table, and another date is occurring 6 times in the table, and you can see how much size reduction can happen when data is stored in this kind of an algorithm by the Vertipack engine. Similarly, the information about time is also stored in terms of occurrences. Now you can imagine the ATM transactions of a large bank in which the time of withdrawal is marked as a date and time column. By splitting such a column with the date and time entry into 2 columns, you improve compression ability that reduces space requirements and improve query speeds, resulting in overall performance improvement. Let me quickly touch upon the column profile information also, wherein you can see column statistics as well as a value distribution chart. And when you look at the image in the screen, you will be able to identify one of the items in the value distribution chart is completely out of sync with the rest of the items that is sitting in the bottom area, which is holding the spelling mistake we talked about in earlier part of the video. Profiling tools are pretty good for finding out anomalies in your data, and with this information, you will be able to find, okay, we have an entry called the fruit that has been spelled differently in 2 different places. Maybe I need to check and correct that. Column profile gives you a more in-depth look into the statistics with the columns for the first 1000 rows of data. And this provides different values, including the count of rows, which is important when verifying whether the importing of your data was successful. Let us say that you have 1500 rows to be loaded. By looking at the count, you must be in a position to say, yes, all of them were loaded. Column statistics on a numerical column provides the number of rows with 0 values, null values. That is very important because you don't want to have a null value in a numerical column. And even numbers, odd numbers, minimum, maximum, average, and so on. These statistics give you an idea of the distribution of data within the column and are important because they summarize the data in the column and serve as a starting point to determine what the outliers are. As informed already, the value distribution graph tells you the counts for each distinct value in that specific column. A quick look on this value distribution chart should help you identify the fruits spelling error we spoke a few minutes ago. You may now ask me a question. Hi Raja, why don't you give us a quick demo? We will be moving into that shortly. Okay, we are now going to do the second demonstration. For your information, you can download all the sample files discussed in this video using the link given in the description. Please download them, do a hands-on activity and understand the concepts. You will be ready to face interviews or PL 300 examination or real-time scenarios. Please subscribe, like, comment and share this channel if the contents are useful. Now, we are talking about the order date column that contains dates in 2 different formats. Some of the rows are in US format, some other rows are in UK or Indian format. Before trying to solve this issue, let us get a clarity on how dates are being stored in Excel or Power BI. Date is normally a numerical value. In your system, if you go to any cell in an Excel file and type this function called today, you will get current date, and the format is something you need to make a note. In my laptop, I have a format that corresponds to a region called India, and I get the date in the format called date first, month second, and year third. Basically, this date is a number. When I change the format of the number to general, it represents a value 45,179. You may ask me a question, Raja, what is this? Please have a look into the cell E1 in your screen where I have typed a date called 01/01/1900, that is 1st January 1900. If I'm going to select these two cells and convert both of them into a general format, you can see the 1st January 1900 is considered as number 1. That is where the starting date is accounted for in Excel as well as in Power BI. And today is 45,179th day from day 1, which basically confirms that dates and times are stored in Excel as numerical value. That being said, if I'm going to apply a formula here, asking a question, is the entry in cell C4 is a text, I get an answer called true. Whereas if I am asking another question, is the entry in C4 is a number, then Excel says no, it is not a number. Let me extend this formula to rest of the cells, and I can see wherever the dates are formatted in Indian or UK format, they are identified as numbers. Wherever the dates are formatted in US format, they are not identified as numbers but identified as a text, which essentially mean that this order date column contains both numerical and text values. So this is a classical example on using an option called change type with local. For that purpose, I'm going to open a Power BI file and imported the required data into my Power Query. Power Query editor has captured the order date column with a data type detection called ABC123, which essentially means that some of the items in this column are text entries while some of them are numerical entries. That is absolutely brilliant. We thought this may be an error. No. However, we want to convert this into a date column. That is a different scenario, because otherwise I will not be able to perform date-based calculations in this file. Tell me how to convert this order date column into a date column. Can I click on the icon? Can I use the option called date here, which is the easiest way to convert the data type in a given column? Click date. Unfortunately, we are now getting an error. The reason is those text entries cannot be converted into a date because date should be a numerical value, plain and simple. I'm cancelling the last activity. While doing so, I can see I have cancelled all the type deduction that was done by Power Query for me. Now you can see that the unit price is also ABC123, unit sold is also ABC123. In the formula bar, I don't see how they were changed from what. Oh my God, nothing to worry about that. You can click on the first column, reach the last column, select all of them using your shift key, and then from the transform tab, try to make use of detect data type option, and we are good to go now. However, our intention is to fine tune the order date column, for which now I am going to introduce the option called using local. So this is the text box in which I am going to inform Power Query that if it identifies any value that looks to be English US, and if it is a text value, then please change that into a date value. Click OK, and we are good to go now, because the dates are converted as real dates, and you can see a calendar icon representing the data type of this particular column. That is great. So that is how I'm getting rid of the issue on order date column. Let me now speak about the null values in the numerical column called units sold in our example. So when I hover my cursor near the green line, I'll be able to see there are 3 empty values or null values in this column. Let me click on the View tab to open column quality, which identifies that there is no issue in this column. Empty is 0, empty is 0, empty is 0, but here empties are less than 1%. And when you hover your cursor, you will be able to see there are 3 empty values here. So essentially, I'm going to do what? I'm going to right click and then I'm going to use an option called replace values, and that is done. So no more empty values in this column also. Let me now click upon column profile and then click on the item type. Then you will be able to see the issue of the spelling mistake. We have an item called the fruits with the 2 different spellings which has been captured here. Since it has been identified, I can go to the item type column, click on the option called replace values, then type the wrong one, which should be replaced with the correct one. It's done. So when I try to get the column profile once again, I'm able to see an item type called the fruits is existing. The erroneous one was thrown out. So that is another issue we discussed a while ago. Let me now switch off column profile and column quality. With a text column selected, let me now click on column distribution, in which you will be able to see how many of them are distinct entries and how many of them are unique entries. If there are no unique entries in a column, that column can be compressed very well so that it will occupy less space in the memory and so on. Let us now look into the order ID column. If somebody is asking you a question, do we have a duplicate entry in this column? What will be your answer? Your answer will be no. We don't have a duplicate entry here because all the 1000 entries that are reported are unique. However, you may now have yet another doubt. Raja, are you sure that we have loaded only up to 1000 entries or anything else need to be done? As informed earlier, by default, the column profiling activities are done for the first 1000 entries. However, I can change the option to column profiling based on entire data set. And in a minute, you will be able to see the order ID column still is perfectly unique and there are no duplicate entries. Though this order ID column cannot be compressed much, my intention is to find whether it holds any duplicate entry or not. And now I am clear that there are no duplicate values in the order ID column. Let me now speak about another issue of a date time column. And I have a sample here. The data from this Excel sheet has been taken to Power Query Editor, and when the date and time column is captured here, you can see there are 12 entries which are unique. If I could convert this into 2 different columns holding the date values and time values, then things will change. How do we do that? I can select the column and I can click on Add Column to pull only the date values and only the time values, which will retain the original column. Or if I click on Transform Data and then try to get only the date or only the time, this column will be thrown out and the resultant column alone will be seen here. For example, I'm going to click on date only. Now the original column is lost. So you can now decide through which option you want to perform. If you want to retain this column for some reason, then you can click on the Add Column option. Then you can call for date only and then choose the date and time column once again, then call for time only, thereby splitting one column into 2 different columns. And the advantage is both these new columns don't have any unique value, therefore pretty much good for compression. The column profiling activity called column distribution helps you identify this kind of information even before you start creating your reports, and that way this is quite useful. Well, we had seen about the using local option and use cases for column quality, column distribution, and column profile. What next, Raja? We need to know about an option called choose columns that helps you to easily select the columns which you want to retain once you upload data from a source. Choose columns can also help you to sort the columns within Power Query Editor either in the natural order or based upon the names of the column headers. There is yet another option called remove empty. Though the name of this action suggests removing empty rows, in effect, it is only a filter being applied. Assume that you apply a filter for a row with a null value. Later, if this null value is replaced with the real value in your source data, then this filter is automatically removed and the row will participate in your report. This is quite useful. We should also know about an option called Unpivot columns. Unpivot is a very powerful option that can be performed to a group of similar columns to convert them into a single column and its value equivalent to another column. You need to see it in action to understand. Let us dive into action with a quick demo on these points. I have an Excel sheet. There are a few columns holding the same data in two different languages. For example, you can see in the image, the name of the city is provided in English language as well as Arabic language. Similarly, you could see many other columns with the same data in two different languages. What you need to do is to remove all the columns that are in Arabic language because you are going to make a presentation for international audience for whom English is more suitable. How do we do that? And we do have another scenario in the same file. When you go to the bottom of the data, you will be able to see a total has been created in the last row for one particular column called new business, owing to which all other columns in the last row will be having a null value. The question is, will this create any problem if this data is taken to Power BI, and how we are going to resolve that? To check that, I have already loaded the data into my Power Query editor. Let me speak about the choose column options first. Our intention is to get rid of any column that provides information in Arabic language. So you can choose one by one like this and then right click and then say remove columns, which will be difficult. If you have many columns, you may have to search for them one by one. Instead of selecting such columns one by one, you can click on an option called choose columns that will give the names of all the columns in a vertical order. And then you can uncheck the option called select all columns and then select whatever column is needed. Alternatively, you can also straight away uncheck those columns that you don't need. As you can see, I have removed 3 columns which contain information in Arabic language. Click OK. We are good to go now. In the applied steps, I can see the removed other columns activity. When I click on the gear icon, I will be able to see which columns I have removed, which columns I have retained. This way, choose columns is a very useful option when you need to select only a few columns to be loaded into your model. In addition to that, within Power Query, you have the option of sorting the columns either as per the natural order. In this example, here was the first column in the Excel sheet that is being maintained here. Or you can click for name so that within Power Query, the column header names are sorted alphabetically. If you have a requirement, you can make use of this option. Let me now speak about the second scenario. The new business activity column contains the total value in the last row, whereas no other column will be holding a value in the last row. To give a clue on what exactly is the problem, I will click on close and apply to load the data to Power BI model, create a card visual and then show you the total value of new business, which says 12K, or if I'm going to change the display units to see the real values, it now says the sum of new business activities is 12,000. But Raja, wait, we don't seem to have 12,000. The total is only 6,000. That is correct. Because this row was considered as a part of the data, we have added 6,000 with 6,000, ending up at 12,000. So how do we arrest this error? I can go back to my Power Query editor. First of all, how do I understand about this error? As discussed in the previous examples, when I choose to check the column quality, I can see empty here, and a quick scan gives me an idea that the new business column don't have an empty value. All other columns are having an empty value. So how do we get rid of this? Plain and simple. when you hover your cursor on any of these columns, it gives you an option called remove empty. Click on that and you are done. However, what you have actually done is not removing the empty row, but you have filtered the rows and you will be able to see the condition. The condition is keep rows where year does not equal to null. What is the effect? When you go back to your Power BI screen, you will now be able to see the actual value being shown. And so this option is pretty useful. So we have identified two simple mechanisms using this data set. I'm now going to discuss about something called Unpivot data. In your screen, you will be able to see two different products, ABC and XYZ, sold at different years with the sales value. What you see on the left is your raw data, which is known as an unpivoted data. And what you see on your right with the green shades is called a pivoted data. And what you see on the right side looks to be pretty easy for you to understand. Whereas in the raw data, you will be reading it again and again. ABC 2018, ABC 2019, ABC 2020 and so on. So you may think that, Raja, this looks to be a good form of representing the data. That is absolutely correct. That should be a good form while you are producing a result. Let us try to understand what Unpivot is. You have a result area for a product called ABC and you have data for 3 years. If it is going to be converted into a form of unpivot data, then because we have 3 years, we are going to have 3 rows for ABC for each year. So, unpivot increases the number of rows but reduces the number of columns. With this introduction, I am moving to another sheet where I am talking about a column called indicator name to be studied with reference to quite a number of years. You can see I have huge number of years, all of them available as individual columns similar to my result data. What will happen if I am going to take this information to my Power Query? The data is now in Power Query. I have switched on column quality, column profile and so on. The first thing I notice is when I move towards my right columns, particularly the year columns, I can see 93% empty rows for 1960, 91% for 1961 and so on. And we have 65 columns and 1440 rows loaded into the model. Column profiling is based on the entire data set. I'll switch off this column profile and column quality so that you can see a good amount of data in the screen. We have a country name column, country code column and so on. In case I don't need them, I can remove. Assuming that I don't need this indicator code also, I am going to remove. Now left with one column called indicator name and all the other columns are year-wise information. So will it be possible for me to create a report out of this with 62 columns? I may be able to create something, but it may be very difficult to create a meaningful report out of this data. And this is the place where I need to think about using an option called Unpivot. In this scenario, I am going to select indicator name column, then choose Unpivot all other columns. When I click that, you can now see that all the year values are populated in a single column and their corresponding values were populated in another column called value. Plain and simple, you can now see that there are only 3 columns instead of 62 columns. And if you are going to pull column profile now, you will be able to see 24,422 rows being populated instead of 1440 rows that you saw earlier. Absolutely nothing to worry. This is going to be helpful for me to create my reports. And most importantly, you can see the ideal situation happening. All the columns are having solid green lines. You don't have any empty value anywhere. This is one of the finest examples on why you should learn about using Unpivot. If you want to quickly check what is the effect of this, you need to understand the purpose why I am talking about this data set. This data set has been obtained from this website. You can also go to this website. You will be able to download the latest files in terms of a CSV file or Excel file and so on. I can see a lot of charts being populated here. I just wanted to check if I can create a similar chart. Let us say, for example, the GDP, current US dollars. And let us try to create a similar chart which we saw in the website, because we now have just 3 columns of data that has been loaded. After we performed the unpivot activity, we have only 3 columns. One is called indicator name. The rest is called attribute and value. This attribute I am going to rename as year, and the type of data is ABC. I'm going to convert this into a date column. Let me click on close and apply. Now you can see the attribute column has been renamed as year column, and I'll be able to quickly create a line chart which is similar to what you can see in the website. For the purpose of saving time, I'm going to create the chart and then show it to you. Okay, my chart is ready in Power BI. I'm quickly checking what needs to be created, GDP current US dollars, and I have created something similar to that in Power BI. So you can see GDP current US dollars is a slicer. I can change that in case I want to see a different chart, and done with. So if you want to create a result like this very quickly, you should learn about Unpivot, which is a very powerful option. Please keep that in mind. Let me show you yet another example about Unpivot columns. Please have a look into the screen. We have a few consultants working for a company, and each day they work for 1 hour. You want to get a summary to see the total time spent by each consultant. The list will grow horizontally, more days will be added, or grow vertically, more tasks or more consultants will be added. Your solution should accommodate such data updates. So you need to calculate how many hours were spent by each consultant. The data is readily available in my Power Query. I could see the names of the consultants, the days on which they have done a consulting activity for the organization, and so on. Unfortunately, we do have a null value in some places which represents on that day that consultant has not worked for the company. All right, Raja, how we are going to create a report as per the expectation? I'm going to keep the first 2 columns, right click, then I'm going to say unpivot other columns. Then I get a value column in which the dates on which a consultant has performed an operation for the company has been recorded. And the attribute column simply says whether it was a day 1 or day 2 or day 3. I'm going to remove the attribute column and would like to rename the column called value to date. Let me click on the home tab, click on close and apply to load the data called consulting hours. I can quickly create a report to show the total number of hours spent by each consultant, which consultant have worked for how many hours. In case if the data is going to be changed, so we have day 6 included now, would like to get rid of all the entries for all the consultants except for Manoj. So as per the new data for Manoj, there should be one more additional hour. Currently it is 4 hours. When I'm going to click on refresh, you can see this has become 5 hours. The total has increased by 1. Similarly, if the organization says that we are now talking about yet another activity that is going to be task ID 11, which will be performed once again by Raja. Now you can see one additional row is included for Raja, which is going to increase his hours of working by 5 more hours. Currently, Raja's value is only 4. I'm going to hit refresh. There you go. You can see the total hours worked by Raja has changed to 9 from 4. So these are 2 simple examples that speaks about the power of unpivot columns. And if you say, Raja, I know a method by which I can create these reports without unpivoting the column, please give a try and do let me know if you are comfortable in creating that report without unpivoting the columns in the comment section. In fact, unpivot columns can help you in different scenarios when it is combined with some other options in Power Query. I strongly suggest you to learn a lot about this option. Unpivot columns looks certainly interesting. The option choose columns is also worth mentioning. What next, Raja? We need to learn about append queries. Appending is an action to add rows from one or more tables to another table. The resultant table will have the combined number of rows from all the source tables. The 2 tables shown here have similar columns, except for the second table having an additional column which is mobile number. It is better to remove it before you perform append action. However, if there is a plan to add this information in another table sooner or later, you can retain it. When one table has a column that does not exist in the other, the combined table will show the column regardless. The rows from the other table will show null. It is better to use append queries as new option. Also ensure that only the appended table is loaded into the model. We should also learn about merge queries. You have more than one table with a common column. You want to combine the data from such multiple tables into a single table. This process is merging and similar to the join clause in SQL, structured query language. You can merge two queries or tables in different ways so that you can view your data in the most appropriate way for your business requirements. We have 6 different join kinds known as left outer, right outer, full outer, inner, left anti, and right anti. It is better to use the merge queries as new option. Also ensure that only the merged table is loaded into the model. When we speak about left outer kind of a join, in the resultant table, all records from left table are produced. Matching values from right table are shown. For example, you will be able to see in this image, all the employee names along with IDs from 1 to 10 are shown, and the designation column shows values only when it is available in the other table. Is this what you want? Maybe yes, maybe no, depending upon your requirement. When we speak about right outer, it produces a different kind of result. Maybe you need this or you may need something else. Similarly, when you talk about the full outer, it gives you yet another type of result. Inner looks to be a good choice in a few scenario, maybe a preferred output. Left anti is a join kind that is ideal when you want to show all records for which the other table doesn't have a corresponding value. Imagine a scenario in a manufacturing company. You have a job card which are not yet allotted for production. Just opposite to left anti is right anti. For the sample that I am using, I am not able to produce a meaningful result. However, it may also be a required type of join in certain cases. We do have join kinds like a cross join, full anti-join, etc. However, they are not available as options in Power Query. We should also learn about fuzzy matching options while we try to merge two tables. Fuzzy matching lets you compare items in separate lists and join them if they are close to each other. A common use case for fuzzy matching is with the free-form text fields, such as in a survey, where the question of your favorite fruit might have typos, singulars, plurals, uppercase, lowercase, and other variations that are not an exact match. Fuzzy matching is only supported on merge operations over text columns. Power Query uses the Jaccard similarity algorithm to measure the similarity between pairs of instances. In the sample that you are going to see in the demo, you are going to create a slicer based upon alphabets A to Z that will be used to filter for the names of the employees whose name starts with the same alphabet. When you try to do this activity with any of the regular join kinds, you will not be able to match all the 716 records. You have some issues somewhere. Finally, when you use an option called fuzzy matching, you will be able to see the selection matches 716 out of 716 rows from the second table. So we need to understand how this works and what is the real problem in the given source data. On a closer look, you are going to identify where the problem lies in the given sample data. And without wasting time, let us dive into action to see how we can append tables or merge tables or make use of the fuzzy matching options. Let us speak about appending data from two different tables. I have a table called Me First, which contains columns starting from employee ID and ending with a mobile number column. The other table don't have the mobile number column, except that the column headers are same and the data is not duplicated. I don't see an row existing here is available there. So the row-wise data are unique, whereas the columns are almost same. I have kept this data available in my Power Query. The first table with the mobile number and the second table without mobile number. Preferably, I can choose the table based upon which I am going to create a append option. And after clicking on the table or the query, I can use an option called append queries as new. We have only two tables, and since I have selected the Me First table already, that is shown as my first table. Invariably, the second table is going to be the Me Second. I can click OK and it is done. I have a table called append one, which is my result table. Preferably, I can rename this as employee table. What is more important after you perform an appending activity is we now have three queries, and if I click on close and apply, all the three of them will be loaded into the model, which is not required, which unnecessarily inflates the size of your model. So the first table, I'm going to right click and I'm going to uncheck the option called enable load. Do the same for the second table, uncheck the option called enable load. The final table called employee alone will be loaded and it is done. When you open the table view, you will be able to see all the 6 records from these tables. For the second table, the mobile column is blank. So this is a simple action called append. You may now ask me a question. Hey Raja, appending the data looks to be an easy job. If I'm going to add a mobile number column to the second table, and if I'm going to add one more row in the first table, what will happen to the result that we have already populated? I just created the scenario in the Excel sheet, trying to hit refresh key in the Power BI, and we are now good to see the actual results which accommodate the updates that you have done in your source data. Probably this will give you confidence that you will be able to append 2 tables or more than 2 tables, even if they are going to be updated regularly. By hitting the refresh button, you can show them in your Power BI reports also. Let us now speak about merge query option. I have 2 tables. The first table is called names, which contains ID of an employee, name of an employee. The second table called designations, which also contains the ID column, that is the common column between these 2 tables. However, this table speaks about the designations of employees. When you look at these 2 tables, you will be able to realize that there are a few entries that are available in ID column of table 1 are available in ID column of table 2. Few new entries are also available there. And we have these 2 tables in our Power Query. I have selected the names query first. Then I'm going to click an option called merge queries as new. And in the resultant dialog box, the names table appears on the top. Then I'm trying to choose the second table called designations. I'm connecting both the tables through the common column called ID. And when you look at the option called join kind, it says left outer by default is shown as the first option, for which the selection matches 4 of 10 rows from the first table. I may say okay for that. Then I get the designations table is loaded here, which can be expanded to see the columns. I prefer to pull only one column called a designation, and the column header need not have the prefix of the original column name. So I am going to uncheck this option. When I click OK, you can see that 4 records were matching. Alright, I am going to stop this designations query from being loaded, the names query from being loaded, and will rename my merge one query as my result. Click close and apply, create a table to see the ID of the employee, name of the employee, and designation column. We have used something called a left outer. Everything from the left table has been captured, and the records that were matching from the second table or the right table were also shown in the result. You may need this kind of a result in certain scenario. Alternatively, you may say, no Raja, I don't want this. I'm talking about a different scenario. Why don't you check with the right outer? This selection matches 4 of 6 rows from the second table. So when I'm going to use right outer, everything from the right will be shown in the result. So as usual, I'm going to do the jobs quickly. Now I get a result something similar to what you see in the screen, and the very first row item in the table is null. You may not need this, you may need this depending upon your choice. This is right outer. I'm now changing the option from right outer to full outer, all rows from both the tables, and this will be the output. You may need this, you may not need this. Let me once again change the join kind. I'm going to use inner, which will fetch only matching records. The selection matches 4 of 10 rows from the first table, 4 of 6 rows from the second table, and this will be the kind of result you will be populating with an option called inner, which looks to be pretty good in the given scenario. I don't see any null value either on the ID column or name column or designation column. Looks to be pretty good, Raja. Maybe I need this in the given scenario. Absolutely your choice. Changing the join kind one more time to choose left anti. The selection excludes, please make a note, the selection excludes 4 of 10 rows from the first table, and you are going to get a result like this, which clearly states that these are 6 employees whose names appear in the names table, but their designation is not filled in the designation table, or their ID and names are not available in the second table. This may be a more useful report in certain scenarios. Trying to show the sixth option, join kind called right anti. Unfortunately, for the given sample, it is not producing any meaningful information. So I'm not even going to try to show you the results. So that ends our discussion on 6 different join kinds. Let me now speak about the fuzzy matching scenario. We have an employee table, as you can see in the screen. Now, I want to filter the names of employees by using the first alphabet in their name, for which I have another table called string, in which alphabets from A to Z are provided. This data is already loaded into Power Query. I have the data query in which name of the employee, designation, date of birth are provided, and I have the query string query where the strings or alphabets are provided. In the data query, I'm going to add a column by extracting first characters from the name column. I'm just going to use only one character. Click OK. Then you will be able to see the first characters are coming up over there. I have selected the string query and then click on merge queries as new. Choose the data as the second table. Connect these two tables using the common column. When I look at the join kind called left outer, it says 12 out of 26 rows were matched. Right outer, 642 out of 716 rows were matched. Full outer, inner, left anti, right anti. I'm just trying with everything. I'm not able to figure out how I can achieve all the 716 matches. I just go back to my right outer option and check the box called use fuzzy matching. Bingo, I get 716 out of 716 now. Click OK and I get something called merge one, in which I can expand the table to show the name, designation, date of birth. Click OK and this is my result table. I can load the result table as well as my data table to the model. The query string is not required. I'm going to uncheck the enable load option. Click on close and apply and will quickly create a report. My report is now ready and you can see that I have used a slicer from my result table's string and the table comes from the data query. When I click on an alphabet, you can see the table responding with names that starts with only that particular alphabet. So this is the use of fuzzy matching when a regular merge operation is not helping you. And finally, we are trying to find out where the real problem is by going to the file holding the data. I'm trying to search for names that starts with a character called yes. Then I'm able to see that there are 2 places in which the names are not as per expectation. There is a comma separated value, owing to which the regular merge operation was not able to get a match for a character called a yes here, whereas the fuzzy matching has ignored this issue and identified them. You may now ask me a question, Raja, but how do you know that the character called S is the culprit? Is it because you have created this sample? What will happen if I get a generic sample from industry? That is pretty easy. What you need to do is you can create a similar merge operation once again to understand the concept. I'm going to do it now. Merge queries as new. I'm going to use the data as the second table. Common column is now selected. Right outer is selected. I'm not going to hit this checkbox. I'm going to click OK. Then I'll be able to find that there is a null value for one particular alphabet. And if I'm going to release only the name values from the second table, I can see any name that starts with a character called S is not reported by the string value. And that is how I found the culprit. So that is about fuzzy matching, an interesting concept, may be required to all of us once in a while. Please make a note of that. We have almost reached the end of this demo. Last few points. You should have an idea about editing M code. Learning to write M code will be a personal choice. If you learn M, you have a powerful tool to manipulate your queries. Otherwise, you just need to learn about editing M code as and when needed. In the previous video, you might have noticed how we have edited the M code to replace a hard-coded value into a parameter. Each query in Power BI Desktop is a let expression that contains all the code elements necessary to define a data set. A let expression is made up of a let statement and an in statement, and a syntax example is given here just for your information. The naming conventions are something that is important. A best practice is to give your tables, columns, and measures descriptive business terms and replace underscores with spaces. However, the table name can preferably a single word, as otherwise, referring the same in your DAX formulas will require the use of quotation marks. Be consistent with abbreviations, prefaces, and words like number and ID. Excessively short abbreviations can cause confusion if they are not commonly used within the organization. Also, by removing prefixes or suffixes that you might use in table names and instead naming them in a simple format, you will help avoid confusion. Creating parameters in Power Query is not a CTL activity. However, creating parameters is an effective way to control your models. You can please watch part 5.1 video to understand creating parameters. Creating functions in Power Query again is not a CTL activity, but it gives you more flexibility in controlling the data loaded into the model. The same was also discussed in part 5.1 video. Power Query can still hold surprises for you. If you have not watched part 1 video in this playlist, the very first video, please check the same. You can see Power Query tools like merge columns, split by delimiters, transpose, fill and then down, unpivot, and other such options in that particular video. Power Query can give you surprises. Stay tuned for our future videos on Power Query. Hope the contents of this channel are useful for you. Please don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button. Please comment for our understanding about how useful the delivery is, and kindly share this channel information with your friends who may need information about Power BI. See you all in the next video. Thank you so much for watching this video.